I never imagined that a simple invitation could unravel the fabric of trust and love I once believed unbreakable. It all began when my wife, Amanda, casually informed me that I was not welcome at her college reunion, citing a bizarre rule that spouses were not allowed to attend. I was dumbfounded, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I pleaded with her, explaining how important it was for us to share experiences and celebrate milestones together, but her tone remained cold and unyielding. Her justification was that it was tradition, a relic of old college policies, and that the event was solely for reconnecting with old friends, not for couples. The rejection stung more than I could have ever anticipated, and my heart pounded with a mixture of humiliation and confusion. I spent sleepless nights wondering if this exclusion was just a one-time oversight or a harbinger of a deeper, darker truth. Little did I know that the real storm was about to break. Just a few days later, an unexpected message arrived from one of Amanda's closest friends, Veronica, who had known her since the earliest days of college. She sent me a series of photos showing Amanda laughing, flirting, and embracing another man, a man who, unmistakably, was her ex. The shock of betrayal hit me like a freight train. How could the woman I vowed to cherish be revisiting a past that was supposed to be closed forever? In that moment, I realized that the invitation to her reunion was merely the tip of a vast iceberg of deception and hidden agendas. I stared at the photos, disbelief mingling with anger as every smile and gesture betrayed the promises we once made. My world shattered, and I vowed that I would never be the fool again completely. I spent the next few days in a fog of disbelief, questioning every memory and every word exchanged over our years together. I replayed conversations in my head, searching for subtle hints of deceit, but nothing had ever raised a red flag until now. The pain of betrayal was accompanied by a bitter clarity. Amanda's life was not the sanctuary I thought it was. I began to notice small inconsistencies in her stories, a half-truth here, and a dodged question there. It was as if she had been meticulously constructing a facade for years, hiding secrets behind a smile and a gentle touch. At work, I found myself distracted, my thoughts repeatedly drifting back to the images on my phone. I avoided eye contact with colleagues, fearful that they might sense something was wrong. Late into the night, I confronted my inner demons, grappling with the reality that the woman I had trusted with my life was leading a double existence. The realization sparked a tumultuous mix of sorrow and fury, a volatile cocktail that demanded resolution. I knew I could no longer remain passive, trapped in a web of lies that threatened to engulf me completely. With each passing hour, my resolve hardened, and a plan of retribution began to form in the recesses of my mind. I was determined to reclaim my dignity and confront the betrayal head-on, to turn the tables in a way that would leave no room for forgiveness. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would no longer be a victim of deceit. I would rise, and my revenge would be as unyielding as the pain that now fueled me. Every detail served as fuel for my determination, and I resolved that this betrayal would ignite a fury that demanded justice. Over the next week, I began gathering evidence and piecing together the full extent of Amanda's duplicity. Every phone call, every vague excuse, every unexplained absence suddenly formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. I found old emails and text messages that hinted at secret meetings and whispered conversations, further confirming that my suspicions were not unfounded. I secretly followed her on days when she claimed to be at work, and I discreetly observed her behavior, recording every detail in a journal that became both my solace and my strategy guide. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Amanda was not only hiding her past, but actively engaging with it. It was a cruel irony. The very woman I loved had betrayed our vows by immersing herself in a life I never even knew existed. At times, I questioned my sanity, wondering if I was constructing elaborate scenarios in my mind, but every piece of evidence reinforced the reality that I had been deceived. I also discovered that her reunion was not a simple social gathering, but a carefully orchestrated event, designed to rekindle old flames and settle old scores. The thought of her laughing freely with someone who had once been so intimately involved with her made my blood boil. In that moment, I realized that my path was set. I would not let her continue her double life unchecked. Every betrayal, every lie, every secret whispered in the dark had led me to this juncture. It was time for me to reclaim control of my own narrative and deliver a punishment that matched the magnitude of her treachery. I began planning a series of moves, each calculated with precision, to ensure that my retribution would be both satisfying and irrevocable. And nothing would stop me. I would expose every lie. With the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders, I set my plan into motion with deliberate care. I arranged a meeting with a mutual acquaintance who had always been privy to the intricate dynamics of Amanda's social life. Under the guise of seeking advice, I managed to extract further details about her secret rendezvous and the individuals involved. This friend, whose loyalty I had once trusted implicitly, inadvertently confirmed that Amanda had been spending nights in clandestine locations, meeting not only with her ex, but with several other figures from her past that I had never even suspected existed. Every revelation was a dagger to my heart, yet it also served as a catalyst that pushed me toward decisive action. I spent hours crafting messages and staging conversations with key players in her circle, ensuring that every word and gesture would be documented. I meticulously recorded interactions from casual phone calls to covert meetings, amassing a portfolio of damning evidence that painted a portrait of deliberate deception. As my network of information grew, so too did my resolve. The betrayal had transformed from a personal wound into a mission of reclaiming my self-respect. I realized that the true punishment for Amanda was not just in public humiliation, but in stripping away the carefully constructed illusions she maintained about herself. I was determined to expose the lies for what they were, to force her into a confrontation with the truth she had long evaded. The preparation was exhausting, yet each sleepless night and anxious moment only strengthened my commitment. I began to see the betrayal in stark clarity, each piece of evidence a testament to the duplicity that had infiltrated every aspect of our life together. I vowed silently that nothing would remain hidden forever. I would expose every lie. In the ensuing days, I immersed myself in a double life of my own, blending routine activities with covert surveillance. I attended social gatherings and family events while my mind was focused on the undercurrent of treachery that now defined my existence. Every smile I exchanged felt forced, every conversation a silent battle between my public facade and the raging tempest within. I began to observe subtle cues from people around me, listening for whispers that might further confirm Amanda's secret alliances. I even started a discreet online search, piecing together digital breadcrumbs that led me to unexpected online profiles and chat groups. The process was painstaking, but every new discovery added another layer of conviction to my cause. I kept detailed records of dates, times, and locations, compiling a dossier that would later serve as undeniable evidence of her infidelity. My emotions swung wildly between numb acceptance and explosive anger. I realized that the shock of betrayal was not merely about the act itself, but about the deep-seated deception that had been allowed to fester over time. I felt like a chess player making calculated moves against an opponent I once trusted implicitly. The irony of my situation was not lost on me. I had become both the investigator and the target of a lie that had shattered my identity. Yet, in that darkness, a spark of determination began to glow. I refused to be defined by Amanda's deceit, and instead, I resolved to channel my pain into a pursuit of justice. Each passing day further solidified my resolve, turning my personal agony into a mission of self-assertion and unyielding retribution. Every breath I took was a silent promise to reclaim my life from the clutches of deceit and to ensure that Amanda faced the consequences of her actions. Armed with my meticulously compiled dossier and a determination that bordered on obsession, I decided it was time to confront the underbelly of Amanda's world. I began by reaching out to individuals who had previously shown discontent with her manipulative ways, those who had been slighted or deceived in minor ways that had gone unnoticed. I arranged secret meetings in dimly lit cafes and inconspicuous parking lots, where whispered confidences revealed a pattern of exploitation and betrayal that extended far beyond our personal tragedy. One by one, I connected with people who had suffered silently at her hands, gathering their stories and piecing together a collective narrative of her double life. As I listened, my anger grew into a controlled fury. Every account of manipulation and deceit became a building block in my plan for retribution. I made sure that every meeting was recorded, every conversation transcribed with unwavering attention to detail. This evidence was not just a personal catharsis, it was ammunition. I spent nights in isolation, poring over the recordings and notes, constructing a timeline of deceit that would be impossible for her to deny. The process was methodical, each piece of evidence fitting into a larger mosaic of betrayal. I also began to discreetly contact media outlets and legal advisors, planting the seeds of an exposé that would force her public unmasking. The idea of a trial by public opinion, where every lie would be laid bare, fueled my resolve even further. I knew that Amanda's carefully cultivated reputation was as fragile as glass, and I intended to shatter it completely. With every new connection, every confession, I felt the power shifting in my favor, a slow but unstoppable tide of truth ready to overwhelm the carefully constructed lies. My vengeance was inevitable and meticulously planned. I executed the first phase of my plan on a crisp evening when the city lights mirrored the turbulence of my soul. I arranged a clandestine meeting with one of Amanda's most trusted associates, a man who had often been seen by her side at various social events. Under the pretext of discussing a mutual interest, I invited him to a secluded spot where our conversation could not be overheard. There, I presented him with carefully gathered evidence, a series of screenshots, recorded phone calls, and photographic proof that confirmed not only Amanda's infidelity, but also her manipulation of those around her. His face paled as he absorbed the undeniable facts, and I could see the beginnings of regret and fear in his eyes. I explained that this was not merely about my personal vendetta, but a wider reckoning for everyone who had been deceived by her charm and lies. With a mix of urgency and finality, I demanded that he cooperate, to help me dismantle the carefully constructed network of deception that had allowed her to thrive on dishonesty. He hesitated at first, torn between loyalty and self-preservation, but eventually he relented, promising to share more information and to quietly alert others who had been wronged. That night, as I walked away from our meeting, I felt a grim satisfaction. Every step I took was a step toward reclaiming my life and exposing the rot that had festered in our relationship. The encounter was a turning point, a declaration that I would no longer be the passive sufferer of Amanda's betrayal. I would be the architect of her undoing, and every act of treachery would be met with a calculated, merciless counterstrike. I knew then that my journey of vengeance had only just begun, and the stakes were irreversibly raised without compromise. As the weeks passed, the net of evidence I had woven began to spread its influence beyond my personal sphere. I discreetly leaked pieces of the dossier to a trusted journalist known for unearthing hidden truths in the lives of the powerful. With each carefully chosen snippet, the story of Amanda's double life started to capture public attention. Rumors circulated in our social circles and online communities, and soon whispers of scandal reached the ears of those who had once idolized her. The pressure on her began to mount as old friends distanced themselves and former admirers turned their backs in silent judgment. I watched with a detached sense of satisfaction as the facade she had so meticulously maintained began to crumble. In the midst of this chaos, Amanda's behavior grew erratic and desperate. She tried to counter the mounting accusations with frantic denials and frantic damage control, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. The more she struggled to salvage her reputation, the deeper she sank into a vortex of lies and half-truths. Every public statement and private conversation was a reminder of the inevitable reckoning that awaited her. I maintained my anonymity, allowing the truth to spread organically while I prepared for the final act of retribution. My heart, once filled with the warmth of trust, was now a fortress of calculated resolve. I continued to gather further proof, ever meticulous, ensuring that every angle of her deception was laid bare. The process was slow, but every deliberate revelation chipped away at the empire of lies she had built. I knew that when the final piece of the puzzle was revealed, there would be no turning back, and Amanda's carefully constructed world would collapse in a spectacular display of justice. My retribution would be absolute and final. I executed the first phase of my plan on a crisp evening when the city lights mirrored the turbulence of my soul. I arranged a clandestine meeting with one of Amanda's most trusted associates, a man who had often been seen by her side at various social events. Under the pretext of discussing a mutual interest, I invited him to a secluded spot where our conversation could not be overheard. There, I presented him with carefully gathered evidence, a series of screenshots, recorded phone calls, and photographic proof that confirmed not only Amanda's infidelity, but also her manipulation of those around her. His face paled as he absorbed the undeniable facts, and I could see the beginnings of regret and fear in his eyes. I explained that this was not merely about my personal vendetta, but a wider reckoning for everyone who had been deceived by her charm and lies. With a mix of urgency and finality, I demanded that he cooperate to help me dismantle the carefully constructed network of deception that had allowed her to thrive on dishonesty. He hesitated at first, torn between loyalty and self-preservation, but eventually he relented, promising to share more information and to quietly alert others who had been wronged. That night, as I walked away from our meeting, I felt a grim satisfaction. Every step I took was a step toward reclaiming my life and exposing the rot that had festered in our relationship. The encounter was a turning point, a declaration that I would no longer be the passive sufferer of Amanda's betrayal. I would be the architect of her undoing, and every act of treachery would be met with a calculated, merciless counterstrike. The climax of my plan unfolded on a rainy afternoon that felt like the world itself was weeping for Amanda's impending downfall. I orchestrated a private confrontation at a location she frequented, a chic restaurant where she had often basked in the glow of admiration. I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve, and waited in the shadows until she appeared. When she finally walked in, confident as ever in her carefully cultivated image, I approached her table with the dossier in hand. The room fell silent as I began presenting the evidence, each piece meticulously laid out for her to see. Her face transformed from smug assurance to cold disbelief, and for a fleeting moment I saw the terror in her eyes. I spoke in a calm, measured tone, detailing every lie and every betrayal, my voice steady even as the undercurrent of vengeance surged within me. The onlookers, initially oblivious to the brewing storm, began to murmur in shock and awe as the magnitude of her deceit was exposed. In that charged atmosphere, the finality of our fractured relationship became painfully evident. Amanda attempted to defend herself with frantic denials and feeble justifications, but the weight of the truth was overwhelming. I watched as her carefully constructed world disintegrated piece by piece, each accusation a blow to her reputation. There was no forgiveness in my gaze, only an unyielding resolve to see her pay for every moment of deception. I left the restaurant that day with a heavy heart, knowing that the confrontation marked both an end and a beginning, a final reckoning that would forever alter the course of our lives, and a grim promise that I would never allow betrayal to go unpunished. My revenge was complete. I embraced my freedom absolutely, irrevocably. In the aftermath of that fateful confrontation, I found myself walking a path of solitude and reflection. The storm of revelations had passed, leaving behind a landscape scarred by betrayal and irrevocable change. I had seen Amanda stripped of her carefully constructed defenses, and in doing so, I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been lost in the shadows of deceit. The silence that followed was both a relief and a stark reminder of the cost of trust betrayed. I spent many long nights contemplating the nature of love, loyalty, and the price of ignorance. Each memory, once a cherished reminder of happier times, now served as a lesson in the dangers of blind faith. I had tasted the bitterness of betrayal, and it had forged in me an unyielding resolve to never again allow such deception to define my life. As I moved forward, I dedicated myself to rebuilding not only the remnants of a shattered relationship, but the core of my identity. I found solace in solitude and strength in the knowledge that I had taken control of my destiny. The journey of vengeance had been painful and transformative, yet it was a necessary crucible for my rebirth. I now understood that forgiveness was not a path for the betrayed, for the wounds inflicted by lies and deceit ran too deep. Instead, I chose to honor my experience by embracing a future built on honesty and self-respect. The scars of the past, though a constant reminder of what once was, would no longer dictate the course of my life. I had emerged from the darkness, hardened by the truth, and resolute in my commitment to never allow betrayal to thrive again. I stepped forward with renewed strength, embracing the future without regret or compromise, ever determined.